Welcome to the Carpathians. I am anxiously expecting you. At the Borgo Pass, where my carriage will await you and bring you to me. I trust your journey from London has been a happy one, and that you will enjoy your stay in my beautiful land. Your friend, D.
Listen to them. The children of the night. What sweet music they make.
Ooh, ah! Don't adjust your sets. That is not Adrian next to me. That is the professor. What's up, professor?
How's it going?
Oh, man, I'm excited. I'm excited because I know you've been wanting and chopping at the bit to be part of Real Talk. Movies are your thing, just like it's our thing, just like it's Adrian's thing. Adrian is on location. He may or may not pop in here. I don't know. I sent him the link. He is welcome to join us at any moment or not at all. I don't know. But I had to have you on the Dracula episode, right? Because it's Halloween season and we all have a good time watching horror movies and scary movies. Everybody's flipping out about Mike Myers. We're going to talk about him next week. But this week, we're going to talk about an all-time legend, a classic legend in horror. Kids all around the world have always been influenced by that character, by Dracula, by vampires in general. And you can't think of one without the other. Dracula has been in the hearts of children since before we were born.
Novel has never been out of print since 1897 when it was first released.
Correct. So, and there's been a slew of movies, both serious and some of them not so serious. They tell different sides of the story. Everybody has their favorites. You know, my father and his generation, they'll go back to that Bela Lugosi one, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then you and I, we kind of grew up with that Bram Stoker's Dracula with Gary Oldman and stuff like that. And we're going to talk about that too. And then there's been some other things too along the way. But I'm waiting for, I can't get enough of Dracula. I don't know about you, but I would love to somebody do it like, I don't know, in a different twist about it or something. I don't know, something different. I don't know. That's me. I know Netflix had a show recently. Was it Netflix? Had a show which kind of followed the novel pretty, like basically his voyage on the ship on his way over to America.
It was very loosely the novel, and as people said with the Netflix show, I think it was in 3 parts, and everybody was like, "Yeah, you know what? Stop after part 2."
Right.
Nothing good happens after part 2, and I'm like, sometimes people will say that, and I'll be like, yeah, you're right. And then other times I'll be like, nah, I'm going to be an adult, and I'm going to look at it myself. And I did, and then I was like...
I want a big shout-out to Chris Fant. He watches all our shows, Keith, including Around the Turnbuckle, including Home Team Sports, and even now Real Talk. And I didn't notice that the Big Lug is a big movie buff, which is awesome. And big shout-out to my buddy John up there in Nesquehoning. What's up, John? Big Nick, Eagle fan, checking in. Hey, fellas, can't mention Dracula without Bela Lugosi. Speaking of Bela Lugosi, Keith, we are going to start off with that. The classic, right? The 1931 Dracula starring Bela Lugosi, Dwight Fries, Renfield, Helen Chandler, and Edwin Van Sloan as Abraham Van Helsing. Now, if you watch that...
Honorable mention to David Manners, who portrayed Jonathan Harker.
Sure. I couldn't include them all. I usually include 3 or 4. I don't go into the whole cast because
I mentioned Manners because it's going to be part of a story I'm going to tell. So it's a good idea that people understand.
First and foremost, I want to say that I seen this movie when I was a kid, right? Probably the first time I saw this movie, somewhere between 8 and 10. I don't know exactly when, but I mean, it was always a classic scary movie night, right? My mom thought that it was, child appropriate being as they don't really show any gore, right? They show him fighting they show him biting the girl, but
They actually
that's
don't show him ever making physical contact.
right.
The Hays Code forbid that.
But I understand that. But I mean, like, they basically show her, like, they imply she's going to get bit.
It's enough that your imagination probably takes over. I'm sure there are a lot of people out there that are going to go back to the movie now and are going to go, "What the fuck is he talking about? He didn't bite him. Of course he bit her. I saw him do it." No, guys, go check the film. He doesn't do it. That's the power of your imagination.
They don't actually show it, but again, it introduced me to Dracula and who Dracula was, because I don't read. I know you do, so I never picked up the novel. I never read Bram Stoker's Dracula. I admit I have never read Bram Stoker's Dracula ever in my life, but it introduced me. This movie introduced me to that. And then, of course, I think I was maybe 10 or 11 years old, maybe 12, when it was the first time I decided to dress up as Dracula for Halloween. And I over the years, when you're a kid, you dress up as many different things. And nowadays the kids dress up as all kinds of stuff, superheroes and whatnot, whatever they feel like it. There's Ghostbusters still to this day. There's all kinds of, there's people, or the girls are just dressed up as witches, all kinds of stuff. But you hardly ever see the vampire anymore.
It's still around. The boy did the vampire a couple years ago. I was proud of him for that.
There you go. So you're gonna talk a lot more about this movie than I am, because you have stories and stuff like that. But my memories of this movie are, it was one of the first horror films I've ever seen, because when I was a kid. It was one of the first ones ever that my parents actually let me watch, and again left an impression on me forever, because fast forward to when I was in high school, I think, when Bram Stoker's Dracula came out, I got excited about that, because I was like, "Ooh, they're making a Dracula, or a Dracula movie's coming out," and I remember who Dracula was just from this movie, but obviously not reading the novel. But Bram Stoker's Dracula, then I was blown away by, which we'll talk about later. But you go ahead with your stories and your thoughts and feelings of, and my ranking, as far as we do the rankings here for the original one, I'm going to give it a 4. Only I'm taking a reel away only because of it's black and white, and there's nothing, they don't show you anything. They just imply things like you alluded to earlier. But go ahead.
Goldstein. Okay, so Dracula. Dracula is obviously a very interesting story, but how we get to the 1931 Dracula is a very interesting story in and of itself. If only there was a book about it. Oh, wait, there is. If you are a reader in the audience, definitely check out Hollywood Gothic, The Tangled Web of Dracula, from novel to stage to screen. It is a fascinating story of how we got Dracula from the pages of a novel to the London stage to this 1931 movie by Bela Lugosi.
Is he talking about Nosferatu there?
Yes, this is correct. There was an unauthorized, I have a visual aid here.
Yeah.
There was an unauthorized version of Dracula. This is my version of it, Nosferatu the Vampire. This came out in 1998. I'm sure the DVD is out of print, but screw that, go on eBay. I'm sure you can get it for not too much money. This was an unauthorized adaptation in 1922, filmed by Prana Film Studios in Germany, directed by the legendary F.W. Murnau, who was taken from us way too soon in a car accident.
Silent, right? Was it silent?
Yes, it is a silent film. The company changed the names of the characters involved and a lot of the plot details, hoping that they would evade copyright. They did not reckon with Florence Stoker. Florence Stoker she was very litigious, and she was very protective of her interest in Dracula, because that was really the only truly successful novel that her husband had written, and for the longest time, she was living off his income as a civil servant, and as a manager for the Lyceum Theater, which basically kind of took most of that civil service income away. And actually, that was one of his inspirations for Dracula. A lot of people suggest that he got some of his ideas for Dracula and modeled the Dracula-Renfield relationship on his relationship with the owner of the Lyceum Theater, the legendary actor Henry Irving, and that Irving was kind of his Dracula and he was Irving's Renfield. But Florence Stoker, very litigious because that was where she was getting the income from. So this nasty little German company that goes ahead and makes an unauthorized movie, potentially cheating her of the ability to sell the film rights. Florence goes after them in court. Prana, however, was in financial trouble. Even when they made Nosferatu, they go bankrupt. Florence goes after them. By the time it gets to court, they're in receivership. The only thing that Florence can get her hands on is copies of the film. And she wants those destroyed, absolutely and utterly stamped out. The courts agree with her, and most copies of Nosferatu were destroyed. However, some did sneak out internationally. They were copied. Florence was fighting about that. Again, go back to Hollywood Gothic. That's where I get this from. She was fighting about that to the point that the literary agents that felt like they had to take up her cause as an author's rights issue were getting to a point of like, God, will this woman just stop? They tried to stamp it out. It's the little movie that could. It managed to escape the flames, and it's still out there, and thankfully it's not a lost film. I absolutely recommend everybody see that movie. It is the original vampire movie, and I think it still holds up to this day.
Yeah. All right, so talk about this particular movie now.
Okay, so this particular movie comes from the stage play. It is not terribly based on the novel. It adds things. The opening scenes at Castle Dracula with Renfield and all of that, that's added because the stage play could not do that stuff. All of the drawing room things you see and sitting at the opera and stuff, that's from the play because the play could do that. It was basically a drawing room mystery. The play was originally written by Hamilton Dean in London. That was the English version that he toured the countryside with, and he had a lot of success. When it was brought over to America, it was introduced. It was adapted by, I know the last name. I think it's Henry L. Balderston, I want to say. So that play becomes what's called the Dean Balderston play adaptation. Lugosi played the part a lot in that play. That's actually where most of Lugosi's appearances as Dracula come from. Because if you go back and look at it, I think people have this idea that Lugosi is so indelible as Dracula because, well, he did a bunch of films. No, he actually didn't. He only played Dracula twice.
Right.
For Universal. He played in this movie, and he was in Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein.
Right.
And you see a dummy of him that's incinerated in Dracula's daughter. It's a mannequin. It's not actually him. Dracula. He did play a knockoff Dracula in a remake of London After Midnight. That called Mark of the Vampire, and that was for Paramount. I want to say. I could be wrong. No, MGM. I think it was MGM. Right. MGM remade that movie, which was a silent movie, which is lost. And ironically, that's the movie where Lugosi wasn't Universal's first choice to be Dracula. Universal at first wanted Lon Chaney Sr. to play the role, but Chaney Sr. was sick with throat cancer at that point and passed away. I know then there was, I think, a second choice was Conrad Vite. And Conrad Vite, people might not remember because he was a star of the silent era. Most notably, he was in The Man Who Laughs, which is a movie based on a story by Victor Hugo and actually helped inspire The Joker, which is another great story, but kind of off the point here.
We're going to get to him, Chris.
Yep. I will definitely give Gary Oldman all of his praise when we get to Bram Stoker's Dracula, because I agree. I love Oldman's performance.
Right.
But right now, we're kissing Bela Lugosi's ass, as we should.
He's dead anyway.
Yeah. So Lugosi was basically choice C or D. And it really worked.
That's interesting, isn't it? That he was he was like the third or fourth choice.
And he had to campaign hard for this movie. Lugosi was actually instrumental.
Not to mention Bela Lugosi had an interest in the occult and used a mirror in his home for
scrying. Yeah. It's kind of like divination. It's hard to
Right.
explain.
Got it.
I did not know that. That's actually something I just learned.
That's
But
cool,
I
Big
know,
Nick. Thanks for that.
yeah, but I know Lugosi campaigned very hard for the role. Lugosi actually helped go to Florence Stoker and grease the wheels for Universal to get the film rights because Florence was not going to give those film rights up
Interesting.
without being assured that there was going to be a film, that it was going to be a big film, and she was going to get a lot of money for letting that film happen. So Lugosi gets the rights, and Lugosi automatically thinks, well, I'm going to get the part then because I've played Dracula so many times on the stage and I've gotten so many great reviews, and I just helped get you guys the rights, so I'm automatically your first choice. And
Right.
then he finds out that no, they keep putting somebody else in front of him. Well, Lon Chaney goes, now it's Conrad Vite. Oh, Conrad Vite doesn't want to do it because Conrad Vite is worried about how his voice is going to sound in talking pictures. So he's worried that he can't make the jump from the silence to the talkies. And then Universal's like, well, what about this guy? What about this guy? And Lugosi finally says, look, damn it, I want the part. And Universal knew how bad he wanted the part. So Universal says, well, we'll give it to you. We don't really want to. Could you take less than you normally take on this?
Less
So
money.
yes, he did not make a lot of money for making Dracula. David Manners as Jonathan Harker made way more money than Bela Lugosi. I think they said that Lugosi got either half or a fourth of what Manners got to do that movie.
Interesting.
So Lugosi finally does get the part, and of course, he is Dracula. I mean, Lugosi has very few lines when you think about it in the movie, but it's those eyes. It's
Right.
the way he moves. It's his gestures.
Right.
And it's
And he
all of
comes to
those
the
great
screen with his hands
scenes.
like, coming at you like this,
Yup. That's actually what drew me to it in the first place. When I was in elementary school in second grade, I would go to the library, and the library had all these cool books about like old monsters and stuff. That's how I learned about Dracula, Frankenstein, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Yeah.
That's where I saw Godzilla and most of the monsters from Godzilla in these old books. And I checked them out over and over and over again. And I really wanted to see this movie, but back then they weren't playing it as much in the
Yeah.
80s and 90s. The slasher craze was going on and all of that.
Right.
So the Universal movies had kind of almost
It was
fallen
all,
out.
yeah. It was all Friday. It was New Line Cinema. Damn them.
Yeah, they gave us Freddy.
They did give us Freddy.
We're not going
Listen,
to.
we can do a whole damn episode on Freddy, but
We're not going to talk bad about Freddy.
All right. So how do you rank this movie? 0 out of 5 reels.
If you look at it now, there's a lot of problems with this movie. There's a lot of mistakes. There's a lot of stuff that shouldn't be there.
Right.
And when you look at it as compared to the Spanish version, which I think a lot of people don't know this, there's actually another Dracula from 1931.
Yeah.
Back then, Universal dubbing technology didn't exist. And Universal had a producer there, David Croning, I'm probably saying it wrong. He convinced the studio head, Carl Laemmle, that it would be in Universal's best interest to take any movie that they were really going to put some money behind, use the same sets, but hire a different cast for different international markets. Specifically, Spanish-speaking markets were big for them. So you actually have another Dracula that exists that is using the same sets, and it is different actors.
Right.
And actually, technically, in how it's made, it's a superior film, but it suffers very much so for the fact that you do not have Lugosi. You do not have Edward Van Sloan.
Right.
You do not have Dwight Fry's incredible performance as Renfield. I tell you, everybody talks about Lugosi, and they should. Dwight Fry is a
screamer. He's a good screamer.
But it's everything.
Right.
How he goes, from menacing to docile. He goes through these crazy lines, laughing like a madman, and then they'll be like, "What is your relationship to Count Dracula?" Dracula? I never even heard the name.
Right.
So I mean, it suffers for the Spanish cast for the most part. Does a good job. Lupita Tovar is amazing as Mina. But it doesn't always add up to the performances of their American cousins. I would say for the history of it, for what the performers bring to it, this movie's a 3. Unfortunately,
Okay.
Todd Browning made much better movies than this one. Mark of the Vampire as I mentioned before, was a Browning movie. Very, very good. Can't Judge London After Midnight. It's lost. But his movie Freaks is one of my favorites. Freaks is very appreciated.
So we're going to switch movies, but in between, so I am going to remind everybody about our $25 AMC gift card contest. Last week, Adrian and I had 3 movie trivia questions, and tonight I will also have 3 movie trivia questions, all of which have to do about Dracula. Why not? So if you have your pens ready and you're ready to write these down, here is tonight's first Dracula-oriented trivia question. And we just gave you the answer, kids, so whatever. But, I mean, if you weren't paying attention, in the 1931 horror classic Dracula, who played the title role?
Just give them the card now if you're going to make it that easy.
It's not easy because they need all 6 answers, and they need to email me to even qualify to get on the wheel. So it ain't all that easy. But, I mean, I'm sure there's people out there like, come on, man. You just were talking about it for 20 minutes. Okay. All right. In the 1931 classic Dracula, who played the title role? That is trivia question number 1, and we're going to switch gears to my favorite Dracula movie, and that is the 1992 Bram Stoker's Dracula, starring Gary Oldman, Winona Ryder, Keanu Reeves, and Sir Anthony Hopkins. And let me tell you, and there's a cast of other guys too. There's a bunch of other guys in there. Carrie Ells is in there. I mean, there's a bunch of other guys in there. So don't come at me with your crazy like, geez, you should mention this guy, that guy, this guy, that guy. It's got an all-star cast is the point. So in 1992, when this movie came out, I admit I was so excited about it that I actually went to the theater to see it. I took a bunch of friends. We had a ball. We actually had, I believe I was 15 or 16 when it came out. I want to say 16. I think I was 16 because I don't know. I don't remember which month it was. But I do remember that I had to have a friend who was older buy us tickets because it was rated R. And so there was a bunch of us that went to go see it, friends from school, and it did not disappoint from the minute it started. I mean, you have the beginning with the, basically Anthony Hopkins kind of narrating the origin of Prince Vlad and everything, like where he, fighting the Turks and all that stuff. So then they show a little bit of that. They show the guys getting impaled on the spikes and falling. The imagery of it all, the guy like with the spike in his chest and he's falling down into it.
Impalement sucks.
So then he gets to. So then they go to a basically. His bride, Elizabeta, gets a message from the Turks saying that he's been killed, which is false. So believing him dead, she throws herself into the river. So then he comes home to see her dead, right there. And basically, there's a scene there where he goes berserk and he says, I shall rise from my own death to avenge hers. I'll use all the powers of darkness, blah, 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 blah. Now, again, the movie we're going to talk about later, which is Dracula Untold, and each Dracula movie has different ways he became a vampire in the first place. You can speak to that because you read the book. So if the book, if this is more book based on the book, he basically like stabs across and blood starts pouring out of it. And he takes the blood and says the blood is the life, drinks that blood. And I'm guessing that kind of makes him, you know, what he became. As far as Gary Oldman's performance, which I know you're going to talk about too. I mean, you there's nothing that can't be said about Gary Oldman's performance in this thing. The whole thing. Can you, by the way, Keith, can you do you know, an impersonation of Dracula?
Which one are you aiming for?
Well, like Gary Oldman's version.
I'll try to do Gary Oldman. Let me see if I can find a line that works.
Well, here's the line. I'll give you the line.
Okay.
When Keanu Reeves, Jonathan Harker goes to see him for the first time, and he answers the door, and he looks like 150, and he says, "I am Dracula, and I bid you welcome, Mr. Harker, to my house."
I am Dracula, and I bid you welcome to my house. Enter freely and of your own will, and leave some of the happiness that you bring.
I love it. Anne Marie. Oh, what's up, Montana? Best Dracula ever. Agreed. Thank you. Yes, and this has a lot of great scenes. Yeah, we could talk all night about this movie in particular, but I mean, some of my favorite scenes are, I mean, obviously, you know, being as I was a teenage boy when I saw this for the first time. So the naked vampire seducing Jonathan Harker in the bed. Come on, you can't go wrong with naked chicks in the bed, even though they're vampires. That was pretty cool. The scene where he is young and he's young again and follows Mina on the street when he gets to London, and he follows Mina on the street and you know, basically like, you know, asks her for directions or something like that, and he gets her to go with him, and they go and they check out a museum or something. They're checking stuff out, and there's like a wolf that is loose or whatever, and he like talks to it in a foreign language or whatever, and he gets the wolf to kind of come up, and he's like, "Mina, come here. He likes you." I like that scene where he's got the wolf under control, kind of showing one of the powers of Dracula, which is he can control the beasts of the earth and things like that.
Yeah, the meaner things of
the whole chase scene up the mountain where it's a race against time, the sun is setting, and they're all chasing him to try to destroy him at the end there. That whole sequence is pretty freaking cool. But again, we can go on and on and on this. I'm going to give this an absolute 5 out of 5. And I've done talked enough, Keith. You talk about Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yeah, so there is a lot here that's not in the book. There's a lot here that is in the book. It's clearly influenced by...
Well, you can speak to that. How close to the book does it go?
Very close in a lot of aspects. They lift a lot of dialogue from the books. When Dracula greets Harker, that is from the book. Harker's opening speech is from the book, because the book is not told as what we're used to. It's not first person. It's not third person. What it is it's told as a series of Harker's diary entries for his trip to Castle Dracula.
Mina Murray's diary.
Letters letters interspersed where they need to be. For instance, when the nuns write to Mina and say, your fiance has been through a terrible ordeal, he's with us.
They include that.
To come immediately and be married. That's part of it. Dr. Seward's journal on a phonograph recording. Sure. That is part of it. That's the whole idea. Hang on. I think I have the novel handy. Let me just read. I know it talks about how it's put together. Yes, I do have it handy.
Look, kids, he's got the book.
Look, kids, reading. Okay. So, yeah, it's Jonathan Harker's journal. And there's actually an opening in the theme on the first page here to tell you kind of how they did it. How these papers have been placed in sequence will be made manifest in the reading of them. All needless matters have been eliminated, so that a history almost at variance with the possibilities of latter-day belief may stand forth as simple fact. There is throughout no statement of past events wherein memory may err, for all the records chosen are exactly contemporary, given from the standpoints and within the range of knowledge of those who made them.
There you go.
So basically what it's telling you is it's told as, again, a series of papers, journal entries, letters, things like that, and it tells the whole story, which is a very interesting and different narrative structure that almost no other book that I'm aware of uses.
By the way,
but the opening scene, for instance, of Bram Stoker's Dracula is not in the book,
right.
because in 1897, almost nothing was known about Vlad the Impaler. There is evidence, strong evidence, that Stoker must have come across something, a short biographical sketch maybe, because Vlad was infamous in his time for his cruelties.
Sure.
And there were a lot of horror stories that were mostly written by German merchants that circulated widely throughout Europe. So I would not doubt that Stoker may have come across them. His notes actually have been published for the book, so we have his notes. And originally, Dracula was going to be called Count Vampire or something like that. That's what his notes say. At some point, again, he must have come across something with the Dracula name on it, because he crosses that out and he writes Dracula, and then he writes Dracula like 3 or 4 more times, like he's testing it to see if he likes the name.
Was there any validity to the Dracul, the Order of the Dracul, the dragon?
Yeah, the Order of the Dragon. So
is that where he got that from?
From what I've read in the book and what I know about Vlad, there is a compelling case, but it's being argued a lot, but there's a compelling case that he must have read at least something of a biographical sketch of Vlad, because Dracula has a long speech in the book, which is cut down in the movie. I think the only thing that survives in the movie is the bit where he's talking about his people as warriors. We Draculas are warriors.
Right.
Talks a little bit about fighting the Turks, and then says about the blood of Attila flows in these veins. He knew something of Dracula. He got some points wrong. Dracula, like his ethnicity and things like that. But there's enough there that I would say he had to have read something to be familiar with Vlad the Third.
You just reminded me of my favorite scene in the movie. Forgive me for interrupting all that.
Mm-hmm.
When Harker's on the train, he receives a letter from Dracula. And I know that letter by heart because I repeat it quite often whenever I travel to New Jersey. Let me explain why. Because I substitute the Carpathians Mountains for the Pocono Mountains. And I always say, welcome to the Appalachians, or something like that. I trust your journey from New Jersey has been a happy one, and you will enjoy your stay in my beautiful land. Your friend, D. Merrick Miami's here.
Holy
I don't know anything about what you're talking about, gentlemen, but I do know that I beat Matt Cardona last month. Wait,
even here.
Are you trying to say, wait, champ, how dare you interrupt our movie talk by coming on my show? I'm doing a preview show tomorrow. Show up there tomorrow if you got the guts. 12 noon on Around the Turnbuckle with JT Cage. Show up there. You can talk all the Matt Cardona you want. Meanwhile, what we're talking about here is Dracula. You never seen Dracula? None of the Dracula movies, especially this one.
I find that hard to believe.
All right, Keith, we got to move on. So what's your real...
But I have so much more in this movie.
I know, but I mean, we're 35 minutes in.
On the next one.
I can't do 90. I don't have nothing on the next one either.
Yeah.
He said never.
That's what I'm saying. I thought we could. How?
He has never seen Bram Stoker
Like,
because he's 24.
Okay, but like, even if you're 24, I feel like you've seen a Dracula movie, like on accident or something. It's like going to Canada. Drunk on a bet, you can get to Canada. Almost
He's not a
everybody
big
goes to
horror
Canada.
person, Keith.
I guess
It's
that's
just
why.
it's the way it is.
I guess.
He's missing
but,
out.
I mean,
Well, wait, I'll make him sit down and watch this movie one day.
yeah, we should do that.
All right, so what's your favorite scene in this one, Keith?
I think it's the carriage chase. I also love that this movie brings Quincy Morris back because Quincy Morris is deleted
The Texan
from
with the big knife.
who actually kills Dracula. In the book, it's Quincy Morris who kills Dracula with his big Bowie knife.
Neat.
And in honor of him, in the last scene of the book, Mina and Jonathan come back 5 years later with their son, who they've named Quincy.
Neat.
4 years in the Marvel.
So why in the movie did they have?
Dracula.
So why in the movie did they have Mina kill him?
Because the movie created a love story, which is not in the book. It's not in the book that Mina and Dracula.
Take it easy, Jan.
Always good to hear from you, champ. Mina and Dracula do not have a relationship. There is a modern day book where that is done by Fred Saberhagen in the 70s, which is Dracula. Basically, it's called the Dracula tape, and Dracula gives his side of the novel, where in his mind it's Van Helsing, and who is an idiot who doesn't know what's going on. He's a quack. They killed Lucy because of blood transfusions. They didn't understand blood typing, so they gave her bad blood that killed her, and Dracula was just trying to save her from these idiot men that didn't know what they were doing.
Even the Hotel Transylvanias are good to watch. Well,
yeah, I gotta give them credit.
I've watched them with the kids so many times. I'm sick of them. But you know the interesting thing about him bringing up Hotel Transylvanias is I'm wondering, because that's supposed to be Dracula, like the Adam Sandler version, Dracula. But when his dad comes to visit in like part 2 or whatever, his name's Vlad. So I'm confused.
So you have to go back to where the name historically comes from. So Dracula's father was Vlad Dracul.
Okay.
Dracul was the prince of a small country that is now part of Romania. Romania used to be 3 countries: Romania, Wallachia, and Transylvania. Vlad Dracul and Vlad Dracula were the voivode or prince of Wallachia.
Right.
However, they did have a couple of territories in Transylvania. So Dracula was actually born in Transylvania and then was moved back to Wallachia. The movie definitely benefits. Yeah, the movie definitely benefits from that and does take from that. It changes things for its need. For instance, there is a legend about Vlad's first wife who did leap to her death from Castle Dracula. However, it was not the way the movie portrays it. The Turks were attacking during a nighttime raid. Vlad gets everything together. He's going to flee with his few possessions, whatever he can get his hands on, and his son. And she says, I'm not going. If I go, they will use me as a hostage. I will slow you down. I'm not going to be taken. I'm not going to be attacked. I'm not going to be used as a hostage or anything like that by these bastards. I would rather jump out the window and die than be taken captive. And she jumps out of the window, and that part of the river where she jumped into, and the movie brings this up, they change it a little bit. It's not that the whole river is called the Argesh. It's just that particular point in the river is called the Argesh, which does translate to the princess's river.
River princess.
The river princess part they're using to hype her, but it does. Right. The spot is called the Princess's River. So the movie does benefit from some of the Vlad the Impaler stuff. It uses it liberally. The novel never explains how he becomes a vampire. There is a suggestion of how he became a vampire, which has to do with a secret school of like sorcery and black magic that's run by the devil, right? Which is a legend within Romania, I guess, or at least it's a legend he read about. His primary source was a book called The Land Beyond the Forest by Emily Gerard. I have no idea if that's still in print, and it's probably very wrong in a lot of its information, so I don't know if you guys want to try to track that down or not.
Oh my God.
So Stoker was using that as kind of his source for folklore and everything else, and that's actually where we got the word Nosferatu from. It's only in that book. It's nowhere else. It's not part of the folklore. It's not nothing. It's just something he came across, he liked, and now it's part of vampire tradition because almost everything is based off of Dracula. But other than things like the love story, the opening scene, this is very faithful to the book. They pull lines, they pull scenes, they thankfully restore the idea that it isn't just that a vampire bites you and you become a vampire. There has to be some exchange of the vampire's blood and your blood has to mingle for you to become a vampire. The wafer scene is from the book. That does happen where they touch a wafer to Mina's head and Mina is burned by it.
If you read the Dracula book, how do the Dracula books compare to the movies? That's what he was saying.
Most of the movies are not accurate. Most of the movies
But
are
this one's the closest.
Yes, this is the closest because most of the movies are based on the Dean Balderston play.
See, so I don't need to watch the. I don't need to read the book. I just watch this movie.
No, because there's still stuff in the book that's not the movie. In the
but that's what I do. You get the story into it. Rodney Dangerfield taught me that. If you've ever seen Back to School, Rodney Dangerfield said, "Why should I read the book when I can just watch the movie?" It's like Harry Potter. Harry Potter is like 8 freaking movies, right? If you read each one of those books, they're like 400 or 500 pages long.
Are they? I don't know.
Some of them are.
Yeah. God forbid you read.
I know Deathly Hallows is the longest one, and
yeah,
it's like
that's why they broke it into 2 movies.
Right. So my point is that why can't I just watch the Harry Potter movies? Why do I got to read all the books?
Because they change stuff and they leave
stuff out because they can't. Right. I get it.
Yeah.
All right. So what's your ranking on this movie so we can get the next movie?
I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna give this one a 5. This is probably my favorite adaptation outside of the Hammer movies with Christopher Lee. I really love those.
Yeah,
we definitely do those one day too.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean this is just a great movie to me. I love all the actors involved. They're all great. They've only gotten better as time has gone on and their careers have gone on. And like I say, it's the most faithful to the book.
All right. Our next trivia question. In 1992, Bram Stoker's Dracula, who played Abraham Van Helsing? Who played him? In the 1992 Bram Stoker's Dracula, who played Dr. Abraham Van Helsing? All right, so our next movie, I admit, out of the 3 we're talking about tonight, is my least favorite. But the reason why that I brought it up is because it's a more recent one, right? I don't think that they've done anything as far as the Dracula folklore goes in the past. Am I wrong, Keith? In the last 5 years? Not TV shows. That's a different thing. But feature film-wise, when was the last feature film that had to do with this particular character?
In this country,
yeah,
Bram Stoker's Dracula is the last big budget one, but there's almost always somebody, mounting
this movie here
production
takes that character and makes a movie out of it. So
yeah, it's always in the public. I mean, it's in the public domain now. It's actually
what I'm asking you is this 2014 movie the most recent Dracula story?
It's the most recent to hit the big screen that I think people would have seen. I can't speak to, like I say, what might be going on elsewhere in the world because other countries mount things. Romania's huge on it. Romania's accepted Vlad as a national hero, so they will tend to make movies more about him. and less about the vampire. They don't like the vampire so much because they feel like it's obscuring their national hero and his story.
So I've seen the 1931 classic Dracula maybe a dozen times. I've seen Bram Stoker's Dracula maybe 20 or 30 times in my lifetime. That's sad to admit, but it's true. This movie I have only seen twice. The first time, and then recently to refresh my mind on it. This is Dracula Untold from 2014, starring Luke Evans, Sarah Godin, and Charles Dance, who you might remember from a little show called Game of Thrones.
And Luke, literally character actor parts from just about every sci-fi movie in the last 30 years or so.
Luke Evans, some of you parents out there might remember as Gaston in the 2017 live action Beauty and the Beast. The only reason why I mention it is because when I rewatched Dracula Untold a couple days ago, I honestly, that's all I could think of when I'm looking at Luke Evans now as Gaston from Beauty and the Beast, because I've seen that movie a bunch of times with my daughter, and so I'm looking at him, I'm like, it's Gaston. Wait, it's Dracula. It's Gaston.
Were you waiting for them to like break into song and just replace
I was waiting,
Gaston in that song with Dracula?
Yeah, I was waiting for a song. I never got my song, but whatever. Dracula Untold was 2014, and at the end, it kind of left you hanging like there was going to be a sequel. I did research this and look this up. They were planning a sequel to this movie, and they scrapped it.
Yep.
So that just tells you that, they
weren't just planning a sequel for this movie. They were planning a whole universe that was going to spin out of this movie.
Right. Update: Lesnar suspended indefinitely.
Oh,
is that on? Then. Chris Vance watching SmackDown.
Yeah. Chris
Vance, did you see
magical dates already?
Chris Vance, did you see Crown Jewel? Wasn't that great?
I'm not saying because I'll get political.
Well, first and foremost, the Hell in a Cell match between Edge and Seth was actually pretty good.
That's what I heard.
It was, and it was, to your point, it was the way to end a feud. That's the way Hell in the Cell should be used.
As long as they end the feud and don't find a way to.
I don't see why they wouldn't. The announcers kept saying, ending this feud. They must have said it like a dozen times.
Well, now they bet.
Obviously, Vince was in Michael Cole's ear saying, "Keep saying end the feud."
Yeah.
All right.
So Dracula Untold was supposed to be a beginning, and it's not necessarily an ending. That was Tom Cruise's fault later on. But this movie, for those that don't know, was supposed to set up Universal Studios creating their own universe out of their back catalog of monsters. At first, this movie was just going to come out, and it was going to do what it did, and then later on, they would do another Dracula that would be part of what they were calling the Dark Universe at the time.
Right.
Because they were fucking imaginative, Dark Universe. Anyway. Then the powers that be decided, well, wait a minute, we've got this Dracula movie coming out. Let's go back and let's reshoot some stuff to try to now bring this movie in and make this movie like a prologue to our Dark Universe. And then we already have this Mummy movie with Tom Cruise.
Right.
And that was going to be the real start of the Dark Universe. And then it came out and it was a piece of shit.
Yeah,
and
terrible.
Everybody hated it. And it didn't make any money.
So you're going to blame Tom Cruise?
Yes.
Why? Because it's not his fault the movie sucked.
It kind of is. A little bit.
Why? Because he is playing a part. So he's handed a script. So he does the part.
He didn't. And it was a bad script and he didn't do. I mean, I know the real
direction.
Issue. Yeah, I know the real issue here is that fucker Kurtzman, Alice Kurtzman. Alice Kurtzman is the devil. And everything he touches dies. He just doesn't have that mass hypnosis that J.J. Abrams has with everybody. No.
How did you like the Dracula musical scene in Forgetting Sarah Marsh?
I fucking love that. I will fight a motherfucker if they do not like Dracula the musical in that movie. That is great.
Yo, Titan says, "Oh God, that Tom Cruise Mummy movie was bad." Pretty sure he was the producer on that too.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
so Dracula Untold. This is all I'm going to say about Dracula Untold. Besides the fact that about Luke Evans, what I said before, it does offer a different kind of origin of him. It offers a master vampire, so to speak, somebody that he actually drank the blood of to become what he became. That part of it has been part of a vampire lore in every vampire movie and show that's existed. That idea of to become a vampire, you actually have to drink the blood of another vampire.
Well, it was there in the novel. It was there, and Rice brought it back. In 31, they couldn't do it because of the Hays Code. The Hays Code would not let them do. That's why you can't even see Bela Lugosi with fangs, because it wasn't allowed under the Hays Code. Everything had to be implied, and some people have argued, and I think they have a good point, that things were a little better when it was more implied, but then there's also the other swing of the pendulum where the early 80s, when it was kind of anything goes, was also kind of fun too, is to sit there and actually have to deal with the blood spatter. Like, I'm a huge fan of Halloween, the original Halloween, a lot of the sequels. I'm a huge fan of the original Halloween, and there's barely any blood in that movie. Almost everything
doesn't have to be
implied, it's subtle, it's not gory, it's not in your face.
Right.
And then you jump to about a year later, and we have Friday the 13th, which is our claim to fame around here. I actually live about 40 minutes away from the summer camp where it was shot.
He does.
And I actually only live about 15 minutes away from the town where all the town locations were shot. And I can tell you for a fact, most of those locations have not changed. I actually drove through there last summer, and I actually was like, "Oh shit, there's the gas station. Oh
that's
shit,
neat, isn't it?"
Cemetery. Yeah, it's really cool. And that's a movie that really goes the other way, and you see a lot of the blood and the gore. And
back to this movie. Back to this movie.
Yeah, so I mean, this movie is basically what if Vlad the Impaler was a vampire, which has been done in fiction a little bit. I mean, the other problem with this movie for me is when he drinks the master vampire's blood, and then there's the whole thing about, like, when he lays out all the rules of, like, you will not become like me if you don't do this, you don't do that, you don't do the other thing.
Right.
You get your ass back here in 3 days and you haven't done any of that shit. You're gonna be fine. You can go back to your life. The Turks are dead. You're only borrowing my powers.
It was like a trial period, right?
And you sit there after all that shit, and you're like, "Well, I know how this movie is gonna end now, don't I?"
Right.
And that's my biggest problem with it. Is once you get through all of that, it's like, well, we know what all that exposition is for. We're just waiting now to see, like, so who does he drink from? And then you see how much he loves his wife, and you're like, oh fuck, I even know how this is gonna end up too. So that kind of hurts. Is it a bad movie? No. Is it competently done? Yes. Is Charles Dance, and anytime I see him do anything, I love him. Yes. Yes, that is true. Luke Evans does a good job. Sarah, everybody does a good job. The problem is by laying all this stuff out so much.
See you Sunday, brother.
Yes, see you Sunday, sir.
Around the turnbuckle.
Yep. By laying all this stuff out in advance, you know what's going to happen. And to me, it makes it a little harder to sit through the rest of the movie, because it's like, I know where we're going to end up now. Now it's just a matter of seeing how we get there.
And then that final scene, right? The final scene where he's walking on the street and there's a girl there that looks a lot like, the girl 200 years prior. And so her name just happens to be Mina. So you kind of raise an eyebrow to that. Those who know who Mina is, and then and then
Charles Dance is still alive.
And then you see Charles Dance in the corner there.
That's the reshoots for making it a prologue for the aborted Dark Universe.
Right, and it kind of sucks because it leaves you hanging, and you think there's going to be a sequel, and then there's not. So you're like, I guess they felt like there was no money in it, or it wasn't going to happen. So
the mummy killed everything. The Mummy killed all of it, because the Mummy was supposed to be the launch point for the Dark Universe, I think there was talk about getting Johnny Depp as the Invisible Man. They were going to spend some money. They wanted this to be their Marvel universe. And like everybody else who isn't Marvel, who tries to set up a universe, it fell flat. It didn't work. The Mummy just poisoned the whole thing. And Universal was like, put the toys back in the box for a few years. Let's see what we can come up with next. So now the idea is Blumhouse has it, and I guess they're going to just it's going to be like Blumhouse's Dracula, Blumhouse's, we saw with the Invisible Man, they already did that. That was really good. I like that. But it's going to be like Blumhouse does the Universal Monsters, and I think everything is going to be just their take on it. It's not going to connect. It's not going to be a shared universe or any of that stuff.
Just like a reboot. Just a reboot of everything.
It's basically what the Universal Monsters were to start with. It's just, let's just make a cycle of movies and make as much money as we can. And things like House of Dracula and the
You're saying you're not going to, if there's a new Dracula movie, you're saying you're not going to be interested in it?
No, I'll be interested. For the most part, I like what Blumhouse does. I mean, yeah, they do hits and misses, but when you do as many movies as they do, not everything is going to be a gem. But
all
I
right,
like all of their stuff.
I give this a 2 out of 5, only because of Charles Dance, and the rest of the cast actually does a good job. It's just that the movie itself is, would I watch it again? Probably not.
Yeah, I would be right there with you on. It's a 2. It's competently done. It's just from a storytelling perspective.
It's got great action. I mean, it's got great. Yeah. If you like the sword fights and all that medieval stuff and armies, if you're into that kind of stuff where medieval armies against medieval armies, you love that kind of stuff. It's got all that, Yeah,
but I get offended as a history buff about it because it takes away from the achievements that Vlad the Impaler did make. Because he kicked the Turks' ass. They outnumbered him badly, and he won a lot of great battles. And this movie turns it into, because he was a vampire. It's like, no, he won because he was a sick fuck. Because he was willing to take plague victims and be like, come here, I got a blanket. And smear, blankets with their plague stuff on it and throw it at the Turks, or go, hey, here's some money. Go into their camp and like sleep with all the soldiers and stuff to give them, diseases. Or he would take impaled victims and he lined them all up on the battlefield. They called it the Forest of the Impaled, and the Sultan himself showed up, saw that, and is like, we're going home now. And everybody's like, what are you talking about? We're going home now. He's like, a guy that's that sick, and most of them were his own people. Someone who's that sick that'll do that to his own people, he's a madman. We can't beat that guy. We don't want to fight him. We're going home. And they turned around and left. And that's amazing. But then this movie turns it into like he had vampire powers for a day.
All right, so our final trivia question of the night is from said movie, and that is, in the 2014 Dracula Untold, who played the master vampire who gave Dracula his power? In the 2014 Dracula Untold, who played the master vampire? We just said his name a bunch of times, so if you didn't get it, you weren't paying attention. All right, be sure to send all 6 of your answers to our email address, which is 2m1lmedia@gmail.com. Right there it is, 2m1lmedia.com. And if you're like, well, what? I only saw 3 questions. Where are the other 3? Last week I had 3 also. So you can go to our YouTube channel and you can watch last week's Real Talk and get those 3 questions. Get your other 3 questions from this show. Send all 6 answers to 2m1lmedia@gmail.com. In the suggested box, I want you to put Real Talk, please. So I know what you're doing. And we'll see who wins that $25 AMC gift card. Ladies and gentlemen, let me explain something.
You just admitted he doesn't read, so you really better put that in the subject line, or he's not going to read your email just because he doesn't like to read.
You have a $25 AMC gift card on us. If you give me all 6 of those questions, we're going to take all. So say there's 5 or 6 of you that have the exact answers I want. I'm going to put you on a wheel, spin the wheel, and the winner gets that card. On our Halloween special next week, next Friday, we're back and we're talking Halloween. We're talking Halloween, the original one. We're talking Halloween Kills. And we're going to critique those. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to say something right here, right now. I kept the professor in a cage to keep this under an hour. I tried my best. He would talk about Dracula for 2 or 3 hours if I let him. So I want to first off thank you for all that knowledge that you have, because I know it was coming, and I know you'd have a lot more, and I probably cut you off 5 or 6 times where you had so much more to say, and I apologize for that. But damn it, I needed to keep this under an hour, and I barely did it. So, but first and foremost, though, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, because you're my partner in crime and around the turnbuckle. But also, thank you for coming on tonight on Real Talk and talking some Dracula, because I know it's your forte.
Yep, I love movies. I love horror movies. I love Dracula movies. You know, I've liked Dracula since I was a kid. It's just, that's my thing. That's one of my guys.
So I was supposed to have TJ Spitter on next week for the Halloween special, because he is a huge Mike Myers guy, right? Mm-hmm. And something came up. He's actually doing something that exact same night, that exact same time. So you are welcome to take his place next week.
Oh yeah, I love
with me and Adrian, and we'll be back and we'll be talking some Mike Myers next week on Around the Turnbuckle. I'm sorry, on Real. I get these all they're all meshed together. I have Home Team Sports on Tuesday.
I'm waiting for the opener to come up, and I'm like, why the fuck is this not the Around the Turnbuckle? Oh wait, I'm not on Around the Turnbuckle. Never mind.
Yeah. So thanks everybody for chiming in. Thanks, Big Chris fan. Thanks, Big Nick. Thanks everybody for chiming in and throwing your 2 cents in. Nice to see you, Montana. I hope you're feeling better. And everybody who supports us on 2M1L Media, whether it's me and the professor on Around the Turnbuckle, whether it's Spitting with Spitter on Tuesdays. Speaking of Around the Turnbuckle, tomorrow at 12 noon, I have a special episode. Keith is working, so my special guest co-host, my special guest co-host is none other than JT Cage, the ruiner of them all. And we're going to be talking about that Halloween event that Keith and I are attending tomorrow night in Quakertown, live at the Q-Mart. And Cage and I were going to go through all the card. We're going to give you all the insights. We're going to give you last-minute stuff. And, of course, he's got a few words, I'm sure, for the cult. So tomorrow at 12 noon, I will see all you, and I'll see JT Cage, and I'm sure I won't get much of a word in edgewise with the ruiner of it all. Keith, you got any parting gifts?
Yeah, I want to thank you for letting me come on and talk about this. I hope the audience, enjoyed the insights. If you've seen these movies, hopefully I gave you a little something extra to think about, maybe gave you some other movies to track down, some stuff to read. I mean, Dracula's been with us over 100 years now. We're coming up on 130 years, actually, in a few years.
And I don't think it'll ever go away. I really don't.
No, it's so much a part of the culture. It's so much a touchstone now. I would argue Dracula is an archetype for horror villains at this point. Sure. I don't think you have Freddy Krueger unless you have Dracula, that villain that's just pure concentrated evil and fucking rebels in it. So yeah, I thank you for having me on. I thank everybody for spending the hour with us, and hopefully you enjoyed yourself and party on. Enjoy Halloween. It's not over yet. It's my favorite.
Yes, JT Cage and I will be with you. JT Cage and I will be with you tomorrow at 12. Keith and I will be with you again on Around the Turnbuckle Sunday night at 6:00. Until then, I'm the Big Alboski. He is Professor Keith. This was Real Talk Dracula edition. Happy Halloween, everybody.
My friend, welcome to the Carpathians. I am anxiously expecting you. As the Borgo pass, My carriage will await you and bring you to me. I trust your journey from London has been a happy one, and that you will enjoy your stay in my beautiful land. Your friend, D.
Listen to them. The children of the night. What sweet music, Dagmar.